Hi, I'm James from the Connected Places Catapult. I'm going to ask or muse on one question. Does place really matter in innovation? I do think I probably should have gone a lot earlier in the agenda. I think a lot of people have probably already answered this, but do bear with me, and we'll get there in the moment. And there is a story throughout this, bear with. So what is the Connected Places Catapult? I've spoken to quite a few of you and been asked that. We are the UK's innovation accelerator for transport, cities, built environment and the local growth. But what does that mean? And hard to answer. So we work in three predominant areas. So data and digital, where we're working with places around the country on creating digital twins of how towns and cities are working. We're working and developing new climate resilience models with places, looking at utility provision and flooding and various elements of that. So we've got a whole data stream. We also work a lot in transport. We work with the Department for Transport, delivering transport research innovation grants across the country. We've got a station innovation zone down in Bristol Temple Mead. And we're working with some brilliant projects, for example, drone delivery in the Orkney Isles. So again, working in places is absolutely central to what we're doing. And then on our the area I particularly look after and working with, we do work on the built environment. So there's the future of planning. We're doing the role of public realm for driving health and health improvements, for example. And then we're very much focusing on how ecosystem development, how leadership can help drive local investment and local growth. So we do a lot of thought leadership. We've published some quite interesting reports around hubs of innovation and ecosystem assessments. And we also work through a number of bodies we fund or directly support. So I've got colleagues in from the Innovation District Group. We run the Freeport Innovation Network, linking the freeports around the country. Hard acronym 3CI. It's all around supporting towns and cities around the UK develop net zero projects and match that into funding in the market. And then I'm probably never hear these words again. I was so pleased to hear procurement come up because we run and very closely involved in the Innovation Procurement Empowerment Centre, which is all about trying to use procurement to drive innovation. And I promise I will come back to that. We are part of the UKRI Innovate UK wider Catapult network. Why does this matter? Well, as you can see, there are 9 of us covering different sectors, different themes across the country, all public-private academic partnerships, so we are partly public funded. And we're in 65 locations across the country. And a lot of our model is actually about how we can do more to embed in place and have that impact. So hopefully I've explained what a catapult is and what we're doing. And I'm very pleased with the size of the screen because I was trying to, the screen on the graph on the left, it's actually taken from the UK Innovation Survey, the latest version, which is 2023, and it's mapping about the last 2 decades of business innovation in the UK. Now, if those who were here last night, we had a fascinating conversation about language and definitions of innovation, and I'm going nowhere near that in this. Needless to say, I completely agree. It's not all about the new shiny thing all the while. And the Business Innovation Survey does talk about new processes, new products, and new ways of working. Now, I'll leave you to determine it to a point. You can either turn around and say, over 20 years, we've remained about the same, or have we reduced in the last decade? And actually this is hiding so much. So it's hiding the fact that we know the difference between SME engagement in innovation and large businesses is around 15 percentage points on the graph. We know that public sector investment in R&D has been growing relatively rapid. It was about 8% over the last 5 years, against the stagnation of business investment. So what's driving some of this? The graph, the map in the middle, probably no surprise to everyone, it's showing quite a disparity in regional performance of where innovation is happening. Certainly signs that actually this isn't London driven. London is part of it, but innovation is happening in lots of places, so positives to take. And then kind of zooming out even further, you can see the lines, the Global Innovation Index, and how's the UK doing on this? And again, read it as you wish. Either we are still in the top 6 in the world, and we had a great presentation last night about a lot of the fundamental infrastructures and some of the world-leading innovation and businesses and companies. 100% agree. We're 3rd in Europe still. Or is there some concern of how we've gently been dipping down over the last few years relative to other areas that are also targeting innovation? We heard policy wonk earlier, and I love that. And what I try to do sort of here is look at a particular sort of phase, looking back ever so slightly, late 90s, moving into kind of just financial crash, a real focus on place doesn't matter. Place neutrality policy, lots of sector focused into smart specialisation strategies, lots of movement away from places. And then what I would also had on a set of slides was actually we've seen some movement back away from that, quite significant away from that. So we're now seeing a wonderful guide out for central government departments for working with places. OECD, for example, publishing lots of reports about the need for place-based policy making and engaging and having that sort of lived experience. So definitely a kind of broad policy movement back into place. And then we're talking here about the kind of current landscape. And I wouldn't overemphasize how quite big shifts are happening to us right now in innovation places or the world of place locally. So bottom, government missions, the mission, growth mission, I won't order them, but place and all places is explicitly called out in the growth mission. The industrial strategy, which is the latest in a line going back from about 2008, very sectoral focus. Heard a lot about the focus on the ISA sectors today. Completely understandable. Huge section on place, talking about the importance of place and quite significant funding going into that. From a macro level, Pride in Places Fund, very, very local, ward-based, £2 billion of funding going into that. Interesting questions about how they will work together, what types of activity can be funded. But hard to argue about place, and also looking at the kind of emerging local growth fund that replace, maybe not to the same levels, but certainly replacing funding that's coming to an end. It's UK Shared Prosperity Fund, a lot of what partners have been talking about, got their current funding coming to an end, new world. I've put the National Infrastructure and Service Transformation Authority, NISTA, better acronym. They're doing some brilliant work on local business case assessments, the local Green Book appraisals. And I was talking to Amy from Arup last night about, this could, if done correctly, have quite a transformational change of how some of the infrastructure and big ticket items that we talked about, transport, how the macro planning for those and what local places are driving on, how that can be matched. So that could be a real big one. But personally, I do believe the biggie in here locally is obviously the devolution and community and power bill. I completely get the point of devolution and delegation and 100% agree, but I don't think it's hard to sort of say it's structurally changing a lot of the way these mechanisms and places will work. And I think this pretty well demonstrates this. So I've tried to sort of get a lot of the combined authorities on there, haven't yet got the additional 6 devolution priority areas that are coming forward. We've got significant devolution in the nations of the UK, different powers, different funding mechanisms, different priorities. And on top of this, and again, I haven't been able to map them, we're seeing a huge growth of city deals, or some of them are coming to an end. We're seeing local compacts between universities and partners. We're seeing agreements between place. We're seeing new corridors and arcs. There's a whole change of government going on. So are these new places? Maybe. I really liked Albie's point earlier about if it's not actually sort of changing functional geographies, it at the very least will massively change the pathways that these places are accessing these services. And we have been here before to a point. We've had regional development agencies, we've had regional assemblies, or tried to. We've had some great work done by local enterprise partnerships. So how are we making sure we're learning those lessons and making sure that these new economic geographies are working and reflecting place? Now one for the data lovers. What we're also seeing, and really great examples today, was real growth and depth of the local analysis of place, what those innovation sectors are, what their local assets are, what the cultural heritage, how those places are really working. So of course I decided to publish and put up there a national DSIT map. But it really is good, and it does show a lot of data. Unfortunately, I could only put on there what a certain selection of the ISA sectors are placed in place, but it's a really useful tool for showing what DSIT believe the data is showing for the strength in places. And I couldn't map it, but on top of that, you've also got Innovate UK activity, the types of some of the work that the Manchester colleagues were earlier showing as well. A lot of activity of where investment is happening in places. Again, on top of that, we've also got lots of free ports, we've got AI growth zones, we've got new enterprise zones, and all of those are absolutely embedded in place, whether that needs requiring new transport, infrastructure, housing, place everywhere. And that raises an interesting question for me, or a couple actually. So it's talking around, can all places be sector specialists? How is that working if you even look on the map? And then the absolute flip of that is, well, when we look at the new mayoral devolution powers, and they're very significant, that'll be about 2/3 of the UK, of England's population. So what happens in those areas outside? I think, Casper, you were raising some of that earlier. So some interesting questions. Again, love the fact that the triple helix has talked about. I tried to find a better picture for the quadruple helix. I think this kind of does it, but the key point here is that we know ecosystem theory works. It's there, it's established, proven sort of globally. And I'm really pleased what we're starting to see, and we work with places across the country. Manchester's a really, really great example, actually. We were at the IED conference and launching the Good Growth Fund and a lot of the activity that's going on. But it is this civil society, this community society engagement in generating and driving those ecosystems. And I think that comes to a little bit about, not what is innovation, but why are we innovating? And yes, GDP will 100% be a major factor in a growth, but it is also about tackling challenges and places and what those needs are. And I know we're the Key Cities Network, but I'm incredibly proud of some work we did with rural communities and the role of innovation in rural communities. And believe you me, there is some amazing activity going on there, addressing local challenges or more traditional innovation sort of definitions, and they very much are shouting as much as anyone else about we need to be heard, we need to be seen. And I think this then links into, and I said I'd get back to procurement, and I will. These are complex challenges that we need to use all the tools we've got. So I'm heavily involved in the Innovation Procurement Empowerment Centre, which is all about trying to influence procurement policy, which has had quite a big change recently. If you look at the new Procurement Act, innovation procurement is called out specifically within that. Lots of changes within there that local public bodies are working through at the moment. But if you just look at it in sort of one way, and again, I've had conversations around this today, public sector local authorities spend around £93 billion a year last year. Now, if we can use some of that through policies and tools that exist now to drive innovation or use innovation, how things are procured rather than just buying or funding innovation, a small percentage of that £90 billion would dwarf all of the vast majority of dedicated UKRI or innovation fund that's going into places. And we have, and I'd be pleased to speak to it, and there's a lot of case studies out there already how places are using that to drive social value, to design the procurement up front to buy some of these broader impacts in. So it can be done. Wow, okay, this is a slightly older slide, so I apologise. But my points with here is I'll try to do a balanced scorecard for those that were aware of those or used those previously. And I was kind of saying that on the top level, we have a green tick. Innovation is being sort of used as a driver. We've published some research recently that's sort of identifying almost 100 places in the UK that are innovation corridors, the Northern Growth Corridor, innovation arcs, innovation districts. There's a lot of activity going on there with the value of innovation being seen. The slight caveat, this is also happening globally. There's a lot of activity and new sort of innovation hubs and districts going forward. I think ecosystems, the third point down, that really is being recognised. You know, you cannot read the Local Innovation Partnership Fund guidance without undertaking a readiness check, which is all around building those ecosystems, those governance. What is your plan? What is your vision? It is being taken very, very seriously. And I think, again, the middle one I had tried to summarise about us actually saying that, you know, events like today, the knowledge, the research, the academic sort of rigour around what makes innovation work, what tools and policies could use, is growing every year. A lot of activity on there. We're doing some really good work with universities around the UK on the local policy innovation partnership, for example, as well. And then the lot of bottom ones that I had put kind of X's or at least question marks on, there is a real focus on sectors. There is a lot of focus on a lot of really brilliantly designed initiatives at the moment, and I think I've heard a lot talk about patchworks and lots of initiative overload and how this is being aligned, how places work. I think there is a risk there, and I think what we were also sort of saying is that when we were also engaging with a lot of businesses, there is a lot of funding going in. We can always do more with innovation funding. I know everyone would agree with that. But a lot of the factors that are driving or holding these back are energy availability, transport, affordable housing, skills, the quality of the environment, all of which are absolutely centred on place and need that kind of alignment and draw up. So it wasn't a negative, it wasn't a sort of failure mark, but it was just let's not lose sight of some of these risks as well. And then trying to pull some of this together, and I'm moving towards the end now of the question, is what are we seeing that ourselves and places are doing around this? What are some of the challenges? So, you know, a lot of these you'll know already: lack of confidence, lack of knowledge, lack of investment capacity, difficulty scaling, difficulty identifying commercial opportunities or public sector problems. And these are fragmented, complex systems with knowledge, information failure, timing differences, lots of kind of common market failures that we know about. And we've had some great examples today, and we're seeing more and more, lots of solutions to these. So we're seeing a lot of, on the demand side, a lot of work with public bodies. I talked about what we're doing on procurement. We're seeing a lot of strategy development, a lot of policy development, evidence-based development. We're seeing some amazing supply-side interventions, business accelerators, funding streams, entrepreneurial development, a lot of ability for people to take that risk and also have that evidence, prove those models, and then also prove how those investments are leading to that growth. And then a final one that I'm also quite keen to that's come a lot today is there is a role for convening the markets. There is a role for how those ecosystems are built and maintained. It is a lot about actually how we are lining the demand and supply side and strategy side. It takes effort. It works, but it takes effort. So hopefully you've all realised I wasn't going to surprise you with a no, although it would have been quite tempting. I do and always have believed place really does matter in this view. You know, innovation is grounded in place. It's empowered by the collaboration in places and also between places. So what we're then sort of saying is that it is a complex nature we talked about, and I think some people earlier were talking about patchwork quilts, and talking to a colleague also said, well, yeah, and places are ideal locations where a lot of this can be knitted together. This is a right way that this is done, but it's not easy. It does need to be part of a system. It does need a plan. We've seen Salford, great ambition. It takes time. It's got that commitment over time, which we need. Ecosystem theory, I think, is right. I really welcome the quadruple focus and the community side. And again, I would reiterate that, you know, ecosystem thrives, innovation thrives in ecosystems, not in silos. So how we work as around the collaboration. And then I'd kind of gone off on a little bit of a kind of personal thing again about we just need to get the balance right between chasing unicorns, which I 100% understand the financial drivers for and the reasons behind, as well as making sure that we get the places right or enable the places to get the basics right so that innovation, however you define it, can happen and occur where it's going. So that was my canter through. Again, I'd like to sort of thank the Key Cities Innovation Network and all the speakers that I've certainly learned a lot. And we're really, really keen to sort of work with you and understand, you know, does place matter to innovation matter to your places, and what more can we do to support that? So thank you very much.